Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to our Switch Challenge mini-series. Today we're going to be software modding our Switch, tutorial style, so let's get into it. Whether you've seen our other videos or not, just a quick recap of what the Switch Challenge is and what happened last video. Starting off with the Switch Challenge, I'm here to see if these older Switches, the version 1 and version 2, i.e. red box Switch, still have some life left in them. Is it worth modding it and customizing it if you can? Or should you just upgrade to the latest Switch 2? Now, I don't have a Switch 2 to ultimately compare to, but that is something to solve later on. Last video, we successfully repaired our flash NAND, shell swapped our Joy-Cons and console, added some extra things like a screen protector, a case, and finalized our overall cost for the entire build, which is not as bad as I thought. Unfortunately, our hardware jailbreak was unsuccessful, but that won't change what we cover this video. Speaking of, let's get into jailbreaking your Nintendo Switch. This tutorial will be covering any Switch that has the hardware mod installed, as well as any Switch that can be patched through the USB exploit. So without further ado, let's get into it. Quick disclaimer, follow this tutorial at your own risk. This is for educational purposes only. Just because I say to do it doesn't mean you should, nor do I condone the jailbreaking and non-correct use of proprietary hardware. You have been warned. Before we dive too far into this tutorial, let's check out what Switch we have and if it can be easily jailbroken. Going to this website is myswitchpatch.com. Type in your Switch's serial number. You can find this either on the bottom of your Switch or inside the console settings inside serial information. You can also go to this website to check the list of serial numbers. Now, I believe these Switch Lite and OLED models are patched and require a hardware mod, but it's always best to double check. Now that you know if your Switch is unpatched or patched, let's talk about the hardware we need. For hardware prep, you don't really need a lot, just a PC running some sort of Windows 10 or 11. This entire process is probably possible on Linux or Mac OS, but I'm not going to be looking into that for this video. Just don't forget running a Windows virtual machine is possible on Linux or Mac OS, so if you have those, do that. We're also going to need our Nintendo Switch, a USB cable for it, micro SD card, and either one of an RCM jig or the ModChip to solder on. Now, if you need to solder the ModChip on, you're also going to need flux, soldering iron, solder, thermal paste, and the tools to take apart the Switch. And that should be it for hardware, so let's talk software. Now, we'll be keeping it basic for the two different mods. Software-wise, we'll go more into it for the RCM, but currently we just need the Tegra GUI tool. When getting the Tegra RCM GUI tool, there's two places we can get it. The official Tegra RCM GUI website, or we can get it at a couple of different GitHub pages. If you go on to this GitHub page, go to releases, and download the portable or in the installer. Or if you go to the actual website, go to download, it's going to download the installer. Now, once everything is installed, extract it to a folder, or just keep everything in one folder depending if the installer or use portable, and it's going to look like this. We have our APX driver folder, favorites, tools, and our Tegra RCM GUI tool. Now, if we load the Tegra RCM GUI tool, this is what's going to pop up. Now, before we can do anything, we need to make sure we have our APX drivers installed. You can do so by going to the APX driver folder and hit install driver. Now, once the driver is installed, you may need to reboot your PC. You may not. I'm not going to, so let's go from there. And then for our hardware modders, the patch file zip at this link if you're going to be using the hardware mod. We will also need the inbuilt file explorer and the inbuilt partition manager for whatever OS you're using. And that's it. Now, before we do anything hardware modders, let's solder that chip on Everybody else, you can just skip to the timestamp labeled software mod prep and go there. Big thanks to this user for the tutorial on how to hardware mod the switch. Now, I didn't outline it in the last video, but the process is pretty straightforward. You choose your grounding pads based on your console type, solder it onto the CPU, and place the chip in between your switch's sysNAND and the device. This may cause some corruption, so be careful. Once the solder job is done, it's best to test it and see if it gives you the missing files error. And make sure it doesn't randomly heat up due to a short or something. Could be something wrong with the mod chip itself. Next, you're going to want to trim the shield, and that's pretty much it. Now we can get on to loading these files. Now when it comes to the ModChip files, once you plug your ModChip into your PC and it comes up as pretty much any device that would show up as storage, like an SD card or a hard drive, it's going to pop up in File Explorer. You're going to want to enter that. And then you're going to want to download these files, which will not be linked in the description below, but you can actually find them at this website. Once they finish downloading, you want to extract the files onto the chip itself, treating it like a standard USB storage device, and then reinstall it onto your switch, just like how you initially did. Once it's done, just turn on the device and it should reach this screen saying it's missing an SD card, which is perfect. Just make sure the mod chip isn't overheating. That means there's something wrong or there's a short. But once you get to that screen, all is good to go. You can re-button up the switch, and let's get to our SD card prep. Now when it comes to SD card prep, the process is the same whether you have the RCM mod or you have the hardware mod. Now if you're coming from the hardware mod, again, process is the same, so just sit back, relax, and let's see how we go about doing this. Plug in your SD card and open up your partition manager. Now you can also do this in File Explorer, but we're going to do this in our partition manager. Format your SD card as a FAT32. Once it's done, all we need to do is close this out, and let's get to downloading the files we need to put on the SD card. Now the overall switch guide here, the link will be in the description below, but the individual links to these files will not. Now when downloading all of these files, most of the links will be taking you to a GitHub page to download that specific file. For example, the Hekate.zip folder will be in a GitHub page, but the Hekate IPL will be a file itself. So we're going to go ahead and individually download all of these, and then we can go ahead and work on our SD card. Starting off with the Hekate.zip file, this is located on that GitHub page. We want to download the latest version. Just make sure you're saving all of these files to one central folder so we can easily move them over to our SD card later on. I'm going to create a new folder on our desktop, call it SD card, but you can do anything else or just keep it all in your downloads folder. Alright, after we downloaded that zip, going back to our main page, next up we have the IPL file, which is just a straight INI file that we can download. Next up is the sysmmc file. Now this text file, which is pretty much optional if you don't want to play online in the custom firmware run of the switch. I'm going to download it because I don't want to play online during the custom run. It won't affect standard basic switch firmware, only if you run the mod. Next up, we're going to download Atmosphere. We're going to download the master version. If you click on the Atmosphere text, it's going to take us out to that GitHub page. So we want to make sure we download this specific .zip file here at the top. Now while we're here, we can also download fuse.bin, or we can just hop back and download it next in line on this website. And then we have the rest of these files here. We just need to download the latest release of Lockpick RCM, JKSV, FTPD, NX Theme Installer, NX Shell, and HB App Store. Now if we click on Lockpick RCM, now due to DMCA takedown, the Lockpick RCM file is not available on this specific GitHub page. There are plenty of sources out there on Reddit or other GitHub pages you can find. I'm not going to link one. So let's continue on and download the next file. Next up, we got JKSV. We need to download jksv.nro, not the zip file. Next up is FTPD Pro. Now we need to download the FTPD and not the classic. Next up is nxthemesinstaller.nro. Then we also have nxshell.nro. And lastly, we need to download the HB App Store. Just make sure you download hbappstore.nro, not RPX or WUHB. Now, sitting on this screen here, you can actually follow these directions, which actually specify inserting your SD card, formatting it, and copy the files. But we're going to run through that. Alright, we've already inserted our SD card into our PC, and we've formatted it as a FAT32. Now I'm going to create an entire directory backup as a separate folder here on my desktop, but you can do the same thing straight to an SD card. First up, we're going to extract the contents of the atmosphere.zip file and put the contents into our root of our SD card. Then we're going to do the same thing with the bootloader from Hekate.zip and put that on the root of our SD card. Then we need to take our Hekate IPL.ini file and copy it into the bootloader folder on our SD card. Then we'll copy the lockpick rcm.bin, fuse.bin, and put it into bootloader/payloads folder on our SD card. And then we're going to create a folder, name it hosts, put that inside the atmosphere folder on our SD card, and then take that sysmmc.txt file. This is optional. Best use this if you don't want to play online in the custom firmware. And then we're going to create a new folder called App Store inside the switch folder on our SD card and put the appstore.nro file in it. Lastly, we're going to copy all of those .nro files, the JKSV, FTPD, nxshell, and nxthemesinstaller into the switch folder on our SD card. Now, after you've copied and moved all the files, this is what the directory should look like. And that pretty much sums up SD card prep. Now, once we put our SD card into our switch and boot it, it's going to create a Nintendo folder, which will then house all the other stuff we're going to do specifically for the Nintendo firmware. So if you're hopping back to this website here and seeing that it says there's a Nintendo folder, it will get created once you actually boot the switch. So once again, that concludes SD card prep. Let's eject our SD card, plug it into our switch, and if you have the hardware mod, you can give it a boot. Everyone else, we need to plug our switch into our PC and push the payload. Now, if you have the Tegra GUI tool already installed, as well as the APX driver installed, we need to plug in our switch, make sure it's turned off with the RCM jig on the right Joy-Con rail. Press and hold the volume up button and press the power button, and it should connect to our PC. Once you get the green OK, then push the payload, and you should be good to go. Now, if it doesn't show any of this, first try turning your switch off fully and trying it again. Sometimes it takes a try or two to get it right. Try another USB cable, USB port, and if anything, just let me know down in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to assist. Should boot right up into that Hekate bootloader, and it should recognize our SD card. This is what that overall process is going to look like. You have to press and hold the power button and the volume up button. So press and hold the volume up and tap the power button. Now, if this doesn't work, you may have to retry it a couple times by pressing and holding the power button to shut the system off. And then after a couple seconds, retry. And then here we have our NVIDIA APX chip connected to our virtual machine. All right, now that we have that green OK, press push the payload, and we're good to go. Now on our switch here, we should be greeted with this Hekate boot, and everything seems to be good. So let's go about checking out what we can do now with this modded boot state. After pushing the payload through, here we are on the Hekate main menu. Now we do have to enter the current time and date. It doesn't alter the actual hardware clock. It's just because we reset our micro SD card, we just need to set the time and date. Now the NYX configuration is set, we can actually explore the different things we can do here at the Hekate menu. We do see on the bottom left side, we have our current temperature, the current time, and the bottom right has our current charging wattage and battery life. If we click on launch, we can launch Atmosphere or the stock firmware. If we can check out more configs, here we have any of the INI files that we set for configurations. Clicking on payloads, anything we put in the payloads folder will be under payloads. Right now we have our fuse.bin file. Checking out emu mmc info and selection, as well as emu mmc tools. We can enable and disable it by changing the emu mmc. Right now it's disabled and eMMC will be used for boot. We can choose between images created in the folder or our SD card partitions. We can have at most 3 partitions based and countless file based. For tools, we can create an emu mmc. This allows us to create new SD file or SD raw partitions. We can create it from eMMC or an eMMC backup. We can also migrate backups to an SD card file or repair existing SD card raw partitions, allowing us to migrate from other emu NAND solutions. Now this is a lot to digest, especially for those not very tech savvy. There are plenty of videos out there that actually explain this and the use case for it. We're not going to go into it. Next up, checking out our tools. Here we can back up our eMMC, allowing us to back up individual partitions or as a whole raw image to the SD card, and then we can restore them as well. On the right side, we can partition SD cards or select USB tools. This allows us to partition our SD card for using with Android and Linux. And USB tools allows us to plug in our switch as a USB device without having to do anything extra. Now, since we're here, let's check out partitioning our SD card. We're just going to quickly back up the current layout. All right, and here is our current setup with our SD card. I recommend using something bigger than a 32 gig SD card, especially if you're going to use other firmwares or operating systems on this. So we have our host or FAT32, which shows our total storage, emu mmc, which is how much storage we're going to give the switch, Linux is as extension 4, and Android user. This will pretty much partition the SD card, so each partition you can put that specific firmware or OS. Now to flash Linux and flash Android, again, we're not going to go into it, but you have to open SDUMS and then put the specific files on there. Plenty of tutorials out there, but we're not going to cover that as this video is getting quite long. Archbit RCM Touch Package 1 and 2 allows us to pretty much fix anything, calibrate the touchscreen, enable or disable auto RCM, dump packages and decrypt package 1 and 2, and allows us to fix archive bits, pretty much allowing us to archive bit for all folders including root, emu mmc, and Nintendo folders, sets the archive folders with a .extension file. Next up, we're going to check out console info. Here we have the boot ROM, lockpick RCM bin is missing or old, we actually didn't copy it over. Hardware and fuses, K fuses, eMMC, microSD, and battery. Now this is just all the information for those specific aspects. It just goes into detail for each thing. Alright, now let's hit launch and launch into Atmosphere, which will be our custom switch firmware. Now we successfully booted into it because we saw that second Atmosphere logo, while our phone seems to focus on a switch, and we're booting into that custom switch firmware. Alright, now that we're there, let's unlock this thing and check out what we have access to. Now to access all the tools we have, click on the album logo, and here we have access to FTPD, the App Store, JKSV, NX Shell, NX Themes Installer, everything we added. Now, if you hit reboot to payload, click the minus button, it should reboot to payload, but sometimes this doesn't work, or at least it has been working for me. So that pretty much concludes the basic look through of the switch jailbreak. There's plenty of tutorials and videos out there that go far more into this, how to set up Linux on the device, how to, sideload anything else. Now, if you had any issues, let me know down in the comment section below. Next video, we will be finalizing our mini Switch series and seeing the end result in comparison to the new Switch 2. So stay tuned for that. Hit that subscribe button, like if you like this, if you dislike it, and I'll see you all in the next video.